there is some backlash going on from real people, not pollsters, not mainstream media. I had to laugh the Globe and Mail editorial the other day. I'm not even going to show it, but it's just incredible bullshit about, hijinks from the opposition while the government tries to run the country. I just about puked.
Yeah, on Instagram, the post, and I was shocked. I think over 27,000 people voted for Michael Ma in Unionville. I saw the Liberal Party press release last night where he said that, after hearing from Markham Unionville residents, he decided, that, it was the right thing to cross the floor. I'd like to know if he actually heard from 27,000 Unionville residents, Markham Unionville residents, because I'm positive he didn't. And I know that there's going to be a lot of upset people in Markham Unionville in this particular riding. It's been a long-time conservative stronghold. I'm angry. Let the people decide, because he's decided for the people. It's the other way around. He was put in office by over 27,000 Markham Unionville residents in this riding. It's not up to him to decide to cross the floor. He made a social contract with with the voters that put him in office. He's accountable to them, and if he doesn't want to be a conservative anymore and he wants to cross, resign and let's have a by-election.
I don't think it's right. We voted for that party, that sort of platform, and to go and switch like that, I think that's I don't think that's fair to the community and the voters that supported that. Our riding, ahead of Michael Ma coming in, had a candidate that was pressured out from bigger powers that were just larger than him. I think people know what was going on. He got pushed into another riding. I voted for Michael Ma and the Conservatives, trying to support the platform. It's been over 10 years. It's been tough. I think people are looking for change. So this whole idea that we respect his decision, it's kind of coy, and we're just too passive as Canadians. I think we got to demand more from our government.
So it's not playing out precisely the way the psy-op should be playing out. And that's because people are just not hooked in to the government the way they used to be. And there's a great report. I better show you the cover of this. I had John Carpay on last month to discuss this. And this is fascinating because it's all about psyops. And of course, we had a fascinating conversation. But this is all about how the government uses behavioral science to influence public attitudes and actions, raising concerns about the ethics of doing so. It's initially modeled after the United Kingdom's so-called nudge unit. The activities have been expanded significantly, most notably during lockdowns and vaccine passports, and was directed to explore ways of promoting compliance with public health measures. So that's what's going on here. And it's absolutely frightening. But here's part of that interview. Policy approaches, which I read that as lie. and support the government in addressing complex policy and program challenges through behavioral insights, data analytics, and social innovation. In other words, the Canadian government, quote, enhances, unquote, Canadians' knowledge of the kinds of things the government wants them to be, quote, informed about, unquote, such as the safety, quote unquote, of vaccines and the danger, quote unquote, of not taking them, such that Canadians are more likely to support the government's policies. Is this any different than the sort of propaganda you saw under Joseph Goebbels in the Third Reich, or what the Soviet Union peddled? This is all about telling people what they should think, how they should feel, and if they don't, they're not really part of the community anymore.
Well, the National Socialists in Germany, propaganda minister Goebbels in particular, were quite familiar with the fact that has also been known by other governments before, probably even before that time and afterwards, when people hear a message dozens of times or hundreds of times or thousands of times, they come to believe that it's true. And so the National Socialists in Germany used this very effectively. They controlled the media, even to a greater extent. And in Canada, we've got government-funded media that a lot of people are listening to, but there's an awful lot of people not listening to the CBC and Global and CTV, so on and so forth. So people do come to believe, come to accept as true what they hear over and over again. In 2020, we're all in this together. Or my mask protects you, protects me. We're all protecting each other with these masks. You get that. Masks are keeping us safe. And unfortunately, there's people, they hear that a few dozen times and say, well, it must be true, because maybe deep down they don't believe that a false message could be repeated.
Okay, but as John points out, everybody's not watching and listening to the CBC anymore. And that's why this might not work. But what are they telling us? Every media outlet in mainstream media is saying Poilievre's in trouble. Poilievre's in trouble. This is a deliberate attempt to try to destroy Pierre Poilievre. This is a deliberate attempt to cancel Pierre Poilievre. This is a deliberate effort to remove him as conservative leader and to put another sort of Aaron O'Toole type in there. Can you find an Aaron O'Toole type? Ooh, yeah, his name's Doug Ford. Doug Ford, I think, would love to catapult from provincial politics in Ontario, where he's getting increasingly in trouble over positions, over policies, over some pretty stupid decisions he's made, get into federal politics and rebrand himself as the moderate who can go up against Mark Carney. He's just like Mark Carney. Do you think it's going on? I do.
Often in so many places at so many times. But unfortunately, governments do. I think they always have from time to time, and they always will promote false messages. And it's very sad that our own tax dollars are being used to manipulate our thinking that way.
Yes, extremely. I think this is the last section I wanted to highlight. How exactly was the WHO, the World Health Organization's behavioral insights tool, deployed in Canada? The IIU was tasked to find ways to reduce public anxiety about reports of adverse events following immunization. They focused its effort on reducing public anxiety about reported adverse events to the vaccine, rather than taking such reports seriously, despite having no long-term safety data of the vaccines in the first place. This, to me, is indictment in the 10th degree. So they told people, relax, don't worry, there's no problem here, without any evidence to say so. Now, we might get back to that later, but it's incredibly important to acknowledge what's going on with Pierre Poilievre. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Pierre Poilievre is not conservative enough for me. Well, he's not always conservative enough for me either, and I make that case quite frequently. However, can you think of anybody who can fill his shoes right now? I mean, Doug Ford definitely thinks he can, but Doug Ford will move the party towards the center, farther left. Danielle Smith, I think, might have potential aspirations to be leader of the federal Conservative Party, but not right now. She's in no position to do that. She's not going to walk away from Alberta right now. Even if there was a poll suggesting that 90% of Conservative voters wanted Danielle Smith to be the leader of the federal party, she's not going to walk away from her responsibilities and her duties as Premier of Alberta. Now, we might disagree with her right now on this pact she's made with Mark Carney, this memorandum of understanding to create this pipeline. But she's already said she's putting her support behind Pierre Poilievre, even though they are both disagreeing about this pipeline. This is almost like a coup, what's going on here with bringing one member at a time over to the Liberal caucus and saying it's all Pierre Poilievre's fault. We know that this former Conservative MP, Michael Ma, was partying, literally partying with the Conservative Party one night, and the next day he was talking to Mark Carney about crossing the floor. What did Mark Carney offer him? Well, I don't know, but we do know that Ma was reportedly talking to the Chinese ambassador to Canada just a couple of nights before that. So what is Mark Carney up to here? It's a piecemeal majority to overrule the will of the people and to get rid of Pierre Poilievre. That's clearly what's going on here. Now, people are pushing back on other things too. Look at this. This is very hard. This is Atlantic Canada, where the Liberals always rule supreme, but they're pushing back on the gun law, the gun grab that Carney is.
Gun rights advocates are happy the city of Charlottetown won't be taking part in a federal gun buyback program. Council voted unanimously last night, going against city staff's recommendation to free up some police resources to help collect guns. But the chair of the Protective and Emergency Services Committee says RCMP can handle the task.
It's a federal program. We have RCMP in our city who are under federal jurisdictions. For me, that was like a duplication of service. If we have room for our officers to get into other programs that really aren't municipally bound, then I believe that we could be offering other supports. I'd like to see more preventative work.
About 75 people filled the chamber and overflow room and stood outside City Hall to oppose any city involvement in the buyback. The program seeks to buy back assault-style firearms. In 2020, the Liberal government banned thousands of those types of guns. That happened shortly after the mass shooting in Nova Scotia, where a gunman killed 22 people.
The Liberal government used the tragedy out of Nova Scotia to perpetrate this on law-abiding citizens. Keeping in mind, Gabriel Wortman didn't have a firearms license. His guns were all illegally sourced. 2
of the guns Wortman used are part of the banned list. The federal government calls the program voluntary, but those who don't hand in or decommission their guns by October 30th of next year risk being charged with illegal possession. That includes business owners.
For one thing, it's costing the government billions, and for another, we are not a problem. It's a sport. People are hunters and shooters, sport shooters. We're not harming anyone.
It's a huge issue. We have shipments of firearms that are sitting in our back room that we can't sell because they're currently on the ban list. So that's inventory that we take as a loss.
There was a pilot project that ran in Cape Breton for 6 weeks. The results of that have not been made public, but just last month, a Cape Breton councillor said 22 guns were handed in. The federal government has said the program will eventually roll out nationally. Tony Davis, CBC News, Charlottetown.
So this is some pushback. And this is an interesting little piece we discovered here. Because this illustrates why this gun control legislation is all politics and not public safety.
All right, so it looks like they're finally doing it. The Canadian government has decided to go after the very last semi-automatic rifle that is non-restricted, affordable, and actually functions well in this incredibly cold weather of ours. They're finally going after the SKS, and unfortunately, it was only a matter of time. They've been wanting to go after that rifle for a while now, but they've stopped before because it's commonly used by Native Canadians for hunting and sustenance, and it wasn't convenient politically for the Liberals. Go figure.
So here we go again. The Canadian federal government is gearing up for another gun ban, and this time they're targeting the SKS. They're not doing it with a big announcement on the 5 o'clock news or a straight-up public ban. They're doing it quietly, through a so-called expert panel with a full rewrite of the firearms classification system and constant pressure from a Quebec anti-gun group that has been demanding the SKS be prohibited for years now. The SKS isn't some high-tech tactical rifle. It's an old, simple, mid-century semi-auto with a fixed 5-round magazine. It's been in Canada for decades. It's cheap, it's reliable, and that's exactly why regular hunters, rural families, and northern communities use it. Even the federal government's own panel must admit that Indigenous hunters rely on it because it's affordable, rugged, it works in the cold, and the ammo is easy to find. That right there is why the SKS has survived earlier bans. If the government tried to prohibit it years ago, they would have been in a direct fight with Indigenous communities who depend on that rifle in particular for sustenance hunting. The government knew it. That's why in 2020, when they banned over 1,500 so-called assault-style weapons, the SKS wasn't on that list. And later, when they tried to slip the SKS into Bill C-21 through a last-minute amendment, Indigenous leaders pushed back hard, and the government had to back off. And that right there is the big red flag. If a gun is really too dangerous, then it should be too dangerous for everyone. But the government tiptoes around the SKS only because of the politics. That tells you this isn't about public safety. It's about optics. Meanwhile, Canada's own crime data tells a completely different story. Handguns, mostly illegal ones, smuggled across the border, are the ones showing up in the majority of shootings and homicides in this country. Rifles like the SKS make up a tiny fraction of gun crime here. But instead of dealing with that, instead of going after the illegal market, Ottawa is spending its energy trying to ban a rifle sitting peacefully in the safe of a licensed gun owner who passed all the background checks. And that is exactly what the Quebec anti-gun group has been demanding for years. They've been pushing the government to ban the SKS. They call it a military rifle. They say the government's ban is incomplete until the SKS is off the market. They want new sales banned. They want a buyback program. They want registration. Basically, they want the SKS gone for good.
So people are pushing back on this one. Now, I've got a real treat for you at the end here, which we just discovered this morning.
All right, so it looks like they're finally doing.
Sorry, about AI toys. We'll be right back with that after a brief visit to the merchandise store.
Ho, 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 ho.
Who cares?